day. So we'll begin tonight. We'd like to excuse Councilmember Ekstrom, who will be arriving late, and I understand Councilmember Swanson will also be joining us. He says around 7 o'clock. So we've got a quorum here, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll ask Councilmember Dalpaz to give us an invocation or a thought and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Barker. I mean, Dalpaz. I didn't mean to give you a heart attack. Councilmember Barker.
No problem. I'll do an invocation.
Okay, thank you.
Our Father who is in heaven, we're grateful for a wonderful day that we have here. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet as city leaders and residents to discuss what's happening in the city. And we ask that we'll be able to make good decisions and that we'll be able to take all of the facts and place them together in a way that we can make the decisions that will be best for as many residents as possible. We're grateful to thee for all that we have, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Dalpaz. You've seen the agenda, had a chance to look at it. Council members, do you feel there's any conflicts of interest that need to be disclosed at this time? Don't see any. So at this time, Council, I'd be looking for an action to consider approving the January 25th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. Any questions or corrections on those minutes in reviewing them? I don't see any, so I look for a motion to approve the minutes.
Mayor, I move that we approve the meeting minutes for January 25th. I second that, Mayor.
Thank you, council members. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the January 25th, 2022 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
I see none opposed, so the motion passes unanimously. We'll now look to approve our minutes of the February 1st, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. Got a chance to look at those. Do you have any corrections? Great job by those who are looking at the minutes. We thank them. All right, I'd be looking for a motion then to approve those minutes.
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Barker.
I second it.
Second by Councilmember Severing. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the February 1st, 2022 City Council meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I see none. We'll now enter into our active agenda and we'll seek public comments. John, do we have anyone online tonight?
We do have 5 watching tonight.
Oh, perfect. If you would watch to see if they have any comments, and just as a reminder, if you could limit your comments to no greater than 5 minutes. You would state your name and where you reside. We'd appreciate it. So at this point in time, we'll open up the meeting for public comments.
Yes, I'd like to ask you a question. My name is Mike Duzall. I lived here for 31 and a half.
Mike, do you want to come up to the pulpit, please?
Okay.
Thank you. For the podium.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, my name is Mike Duzall. I lived here for 31 and a half years. I live on 575 East. I would like to ask why they picked the location to build a new police station when Mrs. Davenport's house and also the place where the community garden is, they've had a lot of water and stuff coming out of there for decades and decades. And how can they handle that without having a problem?
Good question, Mike. I can tell you one of the reasons that the site was selected after looking at several other sites is the city did own the majority of the land there. We know there's a water problem. In fact, I believe, Chief, you have kind of running water underneath there constantly. It's been diverted, but there seems to be a constant stream. So we've been assured by our engineer, Mike, that that can't be diverted and handled properly water-wise. In regards to the garden, we are trying to relocate that and improve it. But we felt that was the most economical place to build. And we wanted to keep it closer to City Hall. So that was the reasoning. I don't know about Mrs. Davenport. John, do you know about Mrs. Davenport?
I believe that's the Bodleys.
The Bodleys.
I know Mrs. Davenport died a few years ago
Yeah.
because my mom died in 2012 and Mrs. Davenport died a few months before my mom.
You're talking about the yellow house here,
Yeah,
Mike?
yeah, the house right next to
Yeah.
the police station.
Yes. We have purchased that, and we think with the police station will actually improve the area there. So that was the reason, Mike. We do believe we can handle the water. Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
John, do we have anybody online that has a question or comment this evening?
Not at this moment.
All right, Mike, thanks again for your comments and questions. We'll now move on to item number 5 on our agenda. This is a discussion to consider a franchise agreement in regards to bringing fiber. That's the word I was looking for, fiber into the city. John Collar, city manager, will lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is this was a postponed, is that the correct
That's the
term?
proper term.
Agenda item, focusing on what the city has as our standard franchise agreement. It does have a different name in it than normal, but this is the same agreement that CenturyLink, a company called Syringa, and Comcast have recently signed, recently meaning in the past 10 years. We were approached by a group called Centawave, who indicated they were going to be putting fiber in a portion of the city and wanted to make sure they were complying with our rules to use our right of ways which requires a franchise agreement. And then the discussion moved on into what are the chances in the rest of the city. And I suggested to them that they come and approach the council, one, for the franchise agreement for what they already have as an expectation for installation, but also to maybe give the council some information about fiber throughout the city, what they offer. And Dave, who's here online, and if the council would like, would be able to answer questions here in a little bit. He seems very knowledgeable on the subject. I'm not an expert by any means, but he talked a lot about making sure there's open infrastructure and some of the strategies that he's seen that communities have employed that really seem to work well, and not necessarily create an environment where there's no competition. But so really, this is just coming back to the council. Do you have any questions before we have Dave speak to the group?
Council, any questions or comments? All right, Dave, while you address this, one of the questions in my mind is the potential of getting that throughout the city. My concern is I like competition, but I also understand that you have to have a certain number of people to financially make things work. So if we get part of the city done and we don't have adequate members who are willing to entertain other providers, that's a concern. So if you could address that and the potential of getting this throughout the city, I'd appreciate it.
You bet. Yeah. Hey, I don't know if give me a sec to get my, see if I can get my, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear it fine.
We can.
I'm not I'm on my phone here. Yeah, that is a concern. As you look at new technology, we operate in several cities now, and sometimes there's always a neighborhood up high overlooking on a mountain edge that sometimes get skipped when it comes to getting high-speed fiber throughout a city. That does happen a lot. A couple things to address that. Any more internet, the demand for it is almost as high as the demand for like electricity. If you can imagine living without the internet, it's everywhere new homes are being built, there'll be a high demand for high-speed internet. And there's a couple of things to address those hard to reach homes. There's some new technology that can deal with you can, for a very low cost, you can get to those homes now. But the downside, I guess I'm condensing down to a 1-minute explanation, but imagine a house that's sitting up on a rocky cliff area. It's really difficult to get fiber, new infrastructure built into where the ground is rocky, and that's expensive. But there is some new technology that Google is pioneering where you have to cut the road, and that has its own set of downsides, but you can cut a slice down the road about a foot or so deep. Maybe you try to get below the road base a few inches, and that's called micro trenching. And that's a technology that allows you to more economically get to these hard to reach homes that usually get skipped. If you look at like Orem, Utah is a good example. They rolled out fiber in that city, and I think there's still neighborhoods that still don't have fiber. That's an area where I guess that's a utopia city, that one of the first cities. And I'm not an expert on Utopia or some of the other providers, but we do see where it becomes very expensive to get to a few homes. But this new technology with micro trenching, if the city allows it in a few places, then that's a way that we know we can get there at really low cost. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but if the city's compromise would be by cutting that road, kind of like what Google Fiber does, you're shortening the life of the road, and it might need to be resurfaced. You might shorten the life by 20-30% by having that cut in the road. And so that's one solution, but there's also other solutions. We're kind of on the side of, we really like open and free competition in the city. So there's some things city members can do to help promote competition. That would be, cooperating with, as people try to bring fiber into the city, you can, there's some initiatives that are happening throughout the nationwide where they're calling them open cities or open trench cities, where if, let's say, a developer is building a neighborhood, usually what they'll do is they'll do an exclusive agreement with, say, CenturyLink, and they'll only allow CenturyLink in the trenches. And so as they open up those trenches for the power utilities, only the developer will only allow one provider in the trench. But as a city, you might consider thinking about a way to allow other providers to be in that open trench. And that's something I could go into later, but that's an interesting idea, that by promoting competition, what you find usually as a city is you get better choices, lower prices, and people are happier having lots of choices with internet. I didn't mean to ramble, but we're hoping to come to the town, and we'd like to just, our initial phase is, I don't know if I can describe it real well, but we're currently bringing internet to a set of condominiums, or like a whole bunch of apartments. They're like condos, single family condos over by Washington, and I want to say a Taco Time over there. It's in that area. And then we're hoping to expand through there with aerial fiber. We've got an agreement with Rocky Mountain Power, so we're already proceeding with some of that. But then eventually we'll want to come down into the ground, where that's where the public utility easements are that would be helpful to get to additional people.
Well, fortunately, we don't have any rocks here in North Ogden, so it'd be pretty easy maybe to install.
That's good.
I wish it was true. But, I am for competition, but I've also found that, only so much competition works. You get it too divided, and then nobody is successful. So I guess I'm looking for the potential of actually getting this citywide, and I do agree, and I think the council ought to look at an ordinance that requires when that trench is open, that anybody can lay fiber in there. I think that would be a benefit to our residents. So John, did you have any other comments?
Well, so, Dave, I know that we talked a lot about if the council signed this franchise agreement with Centawave, you know, in the way that we have with other communication providers. And I think this is what the mayor's getting at, is that there's the potential that we'll never see another fiber group. And so what's your deployment strategy in our city? Is your plan to hopefully service the whole city, or kind of what do you see as your model moving forward?
Yeah, I would probably predict over the right timeline, you know, if we're talking the next 10 years, I would expect other fiber providers to come to the town. Just hypothetically, I mean, I can't speak for Google, but they're coming to any city that will allow them, and they've started down south and they're just marching north. So I'd say about 5-10 years from now, you'll have lots of options as far as fiber. But the speeds in technology are, it's almost like it's like we're on this constant it's like an arms race. The speeds are just increasing and increasing among the different competitors. So it's coming from all directions. You have Comcast, they're based on a coax cable model. It's a DOCSIS standards they can provide gigabit really fast in one direction. Fiber has a neat properties in that has a lot of capacity, so you can do really fast upload and download. And fiber is kind of future proof. So if people need 1 gig, 2 gig, 10 gig, you just change out a little piece of equipment. But there's also the 5G, and I might date myself, but I grew up where everybody had a phone line, copper phone line, a landline. Everybody had a phone at their house. And as technology changes, you know, every few decades, you find that everything changes within, 20-year cycles. There's this new 5G wireless technology, and we don't know where it's going to go, but it is interesting stuff in that it's people that are very frugal are soon finding they get their whole home taken care of by T-Mobile, like a T-Mobile 5G solution. Those are starting to spin up in different areas. And I think what I'm kind of answering your question is I'm a little bit technology agnostic. And the word fiber is exciting because of the future-proof idea. But there's a lot of different technologies that are emerging, and that's just more competition, which is a good thing. And I would probably say, to answer your question, having 1 or 2 fiber providers, is it possible to have that in a city? And CenturyLink, they're doing fiber in all new neighborhoods if they're allowed to come in and do some of their developers work with CenturyLink to do fiber. We do fiber. There's 2 or 3 other small groups like us that are doing fiber in Utah, and nationwide there's about probably 5 or 10 large groups that come through and will do fiber without cities having to bond or be on the hook for any loans. But if, as a city, it gets to the point where there's underserved areas, absolutely you could negotiate with lots of different people, providers, and say, what's it going to take to get this skipped neighborhood? And you as a city could say, lots of different options I think are available to you. What I would caution you is if you as technology changes, it is a little bit scary to take on, say, a $30 million bond and have a company that you're kind of hoping that it all works out as technology changes over the next 20 years. So to answer your question, I'm rambling a little, sorry, but I think the speeds in technology are really going fast. And so if you guys could just tell us any neighborhoods that's suffering, we would happily go after those. We'd love that, to find neighborhoods where they can't get fast service. And our price point's a little bit lower than say like Utopia or Google Fiber. I think Google Fiber comes in at about $70 a month is the price. And we have the same speeds as Google, and we go up against Google in Salt Lake in several areas. So we have the same speeds. We feel we have better customer service. We roll a truck and come out really fast for free, and you can talk to a live person. And people really like our product, but it's a little bit cheaper. Our price range starts around $35 is the intro price, and we find that does really well for people that are economically frugal. And then our high-end prices are very close to Google. When we get to gigabit, we're around 60 to 70. And so I think there's another company like Utopia. That's a good product, but I think their cheapest product, 65, is the lowest cost product. It's a 200 meg product for 65. So you'll find a lot of people really like the $35 fiber product. And so we've got a few neighborhoods that got skipped down south. And as we find those neighborhoods, that's the kind of neighborhood we love. A neighborhood that has only DSL, really slow internet, where they don't have Comcast. And if there are neighborhoods like that, we can put them on the list to go get them.
Well, according to the emails I get, I think we have some of those neighborhoods. That sounds a lot cheaper than 130.
Yeah. Competition. Magically, what happens? When we start offering these deals, you'll find all the providers start to lower their price and be a little more friendly. And
somebody has a
how
requires you to use theirs. Thanks, Dave, for answering the questions. I know our residents are excited to get fiber in the city. I think we get a lot of comments. So let me ask our council members what questions they may have before we seek a motion on this. Councilmember Barker.
Yeah, just one quick question. What's your time frame to roll everything out?
Great question. Really good question. We could probably email you guys we could finalize that. I could get it to John. I've got his email. I can get him a map kind of showing him phase 1, phase 2. To answer that question, there's 2 technologies to narrow it down, maybe 3, but the initial technology we're going to do, maybe 30% of the city is using some of the infrastructure that is there. It's the aerial fiber. So we'll just be following along those power poles, and that will cover, starting around Washington Street, that'll cover a lot of homes. And then that'll probably be, think of a spider web throughout the city. If you've got aerial power pole near your house, you'll probably have fiber available by maybe 50-50 chance this summer or next summer. And then probably by the end of next summer, we'll have more than half the city covered. And we'd prefer to focus on areas that have low where people are really hurting. And so I think as word gets out, people can email us and say, hey, we're really excited, get service to my neighborhood. And that type of feedback is where we focus for next summer. So I would probably say, just as a prediction, roughly half of the city by the end of next summer is our goal. And
Okay,
we can
thanks,
get really
Dave.
specific maps for you if you want to.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Severing.
So Dave, I did some research. It seems like you do provide a good product, but there's no bonding on behalf of the city.
That's right.
Wow.
Perfect.
So you guys are covering installation.
Usually we charge around $100 setup fee. That's our typical setup fee.
Can you start in the northeast corner of North Ogden?
That's where we're trying to get to. That's where I think the demand is, actually. I hear it.
That's where the rocks
part
are.
down.
I've got neighbors galore who would be all excited about it. So
All right.
We'll get an email out, and then if we can start getting some feedback, you're welcome to email me addresses independently, and we can get you feedback on timelines or feasibility, things like that.
All right, Councilmember Dow, are you done, Councilmember Severing? Councilmember Dow, pass.
Yeah, we have a couple of developments right now that have open trenches, like right now as we speak.
Oh my.
So I would hate to make the decision now, and then we don't notify one of those developers, and then it gets missed. So if we decide on this, I'm thinking specifically 2750 and where 700 East meets, it's that development by Carson Jones. If we decide that we're gonna move forward and there's that situation, what are your thoughts on trying to get that done if it's available?
You would be surprised how many developers do exclusive trenches with Comcast and won't allow us in the open trench. So if we could, I'm not an attorney here, but let me plant the seed. Before they're allowed to build that neighborhood, I think they have to ask permission from you guys to permit or annex or get it part of the city. And if there were a way that these developers had to agree that they will allow their trenches to have other providers in those trenches, then that makes it great for us. We'll jump in any neighborhood that has more than about 40 homes, any development that has more than 40 homes, we'll go put conduit in there and it'll have fiber. If
I think
the
we should
developer will
entertain-
cooperate.
I think we should entertain maybe requiring open trench.
And the process might be like this, is you have a list, and I'm thinking it out loud here. I could find other cities that are doing this, but you have a list, like an email list, and these people get notified, hey, there's a development coming, maybe even here's the plat drawings, here are the timelines. And of course, developers, you don't want to burden them with extra cost. So there's additional costs that might have to do with road crossings. You know, if you're saying, hey, put in some sleeves to cross the roads, that would be on the providers to pay that to the developer. But the key here would be when those trenches are open, you have about 2 days, and we would put our conduit in. There's plenty of room. We just have to be offset from power, say 12 inches. So they usually put the power in first, they put in some sand, and then we go in with everybody else. And then that neighborhood then now has Comcast, it'll have CenturyLink fiber, it'll have Centawave fiber. It's an awesome neighborhood. But if the developer signs an exclusive marketing agreement with CenturyLink, no one else is allowed in the trench, and that's the only provider that gets installed. Or the same thing happens with Comcast. We have big neighborhoods in Bluffdale and all over that only have Comcast because of the exclusive trench. So I'm just letting you know kind of what our struggles are.
Thank you, and we'll surely look at making that available in open trench. Any other questions before we seek a motion? I don't see any other questions, so council, I would be looking for a motion to approve this franchise agreement. The agreement number A04-2022. Do we have a motion to approve this?
Mayor,
Councilmember Barker.
I'll make a motion that we approve the franchise agreement with Centawave Communications, agreement A04-2022.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Do we have a second?
I second that, Mayor.
Have a second by Councilmember Severing. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote on this. Let's start with you, Councilmember Dalpass.
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
and Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Dave, welcome to the city, and we'll look forward to great things. So thank you for your interest in our city. I think this is a good call. We've been approached many times before, but it involved some security guarantees by the city, which we felt we weren't in a position to do. So let's move on to item number 6. This is a discussion on the development agreement for Shaw Family Farms project. Presenter will be John Call, our city manager and attorney. I believe we asked Mr. Call to bring back an agreement for us to look at in regards to that development. John?
Thank you, Mayor. So that's exactly what I've brought back, council. It is not the longest agreement because it's fairly straightforward in that what we've tried to accomplish is what the council asked for, which is there's an exchange of money, a guarantee for improvements, and then that if the council doesn't finish the park by a certain date, that the city would return the funds to the developer. And that's kind of what we talked about. There are a few questions that that I think it'd be helpful to get some clarification on. I think from the staff perspective, it originally was kind of proposed that the developer would put the grass and sod in on what we called parcel A. Oh, I should pull up the map for you, sorry. Which is the parcel that's directly on the east edge of the property. So I'll zoom in. So their original plan was to do the grass and sod and sprinkler work on parcel A. Yeah. Oh, there we go. In this area, and then the city would be applying for a ramp grant on this area with the additional 100,000 donation. I think from a staff perspective, because there in theory would be crossover as it went down and around the well house building, that it would make sense to install the improvements and the landscaping on both pieces at the same time. And so that's one of the questions that I think the developer and staff would want some clarification on. Would we want it to just be rolled into one lump sum? I think their estimate for parcel A was about $60,000 for grass and sod, or that's the same thing, grass and sprinklers. And then that would mean there would be a donation of the ground from the developer, a donation of roughly $160,000. And then the city would take that and leverage it into the ramp grant with the obligation that we finish the park by December 25th or December of 2025. Obviously, we're not going to put it in December, or we would give the money back. And as part of the way this agreement is written, if we didn't get the ramp funding, we would have the obligation to install the grass and sprinklers on parcel A so that at least the residents are getting what they expected to receive as they purchased homes. So it is a very simple agreement, and we're not planning on passing it tonight. It's more of a feedback so that when the rezone comes back to the council in April, we'll do everything at the same night, the agreement and everything. So there's still room and time to change things.
So John, did I understand correctly? No improvements would go in on parcel A or B till we were able to leverage the developer's contribution to the ramp grant, or would we have them put in parcel A the improvements?
So that's the question, is what would the council prefer? The developer is open to either option based on my conversations with them. I think, no, I thought I had a map of the actual, what the park could look like, but in theory, there will be a sidewalk that circumnavigates the property and it goes around the well house building. And so the thought was if they did sod and sprinklers on parcel A, we would be coming back in later, tearing out what they'd installed and reinstalling cement pathway or something in that area.
So would we be obligated to return the 100,000, which I believe he was going to contribute, plus the 60,000, or just the 100?
So the way it's written right now is we'd be obligated to install the sod and sprinklers and return whatever's left. That's the way it's written right now. So in theory, it might at that point cost 70,000 for sod and sprinklers. So then they'd only receive 90 back.
And in here, we've said sod and sprinklers. With what's going on in the world today, is there an option for something other than sod, like xeriscape or?
Well, so as it's written and what the developer proposed was sod and sprinklers, the plan from the Parks Department and the planners, Scott snuck out for a second, was actually, it was more of a xeriscape. There was a grass area, but it was a very small, adjacent to the playground, kind of a place for kids to roll around. But there would be more of a xeriscape and benches and things like that designed.
All right, let me get feedback from the council. Councilmember Barker, I believe you have the assignment to coordinate with Parks. So would you like to go first? Give us your opinion on how we should approach this.
I think we should take all the money and do it all together. Whether that's option A or B, whatever John said. Don't install sod and sprinklers until we're ready to do it all at once.
Okay. Councilmember Dalpaz, what are your feelings?
I agree with Councilman Barker. And I do like the idea of doing some xeriscaping in the project. I mean, as long as there's a decent amount of grass to make it feel like a park, I think that'd be appropriate.
Councilmember Ekstrom?
I'm of the same mind. I like the idea, and I'm sure they'll design something beautiful and utilitarian as well.
Okay. Councilmember Severing.
I agree with the other three council persons.
Okay, so you all have the votes. I would just point out, the very reason we're doing this is we approve a little bit more density in the area. We know that people need to get out. I believe the developer's planning on starting development this summer. So we'll be a couple of years without a place for people to go. I should also point out that Jerry Shaw called me the other day, and he has 1,000 feet of chain link fence that he'd like to donate to the city if you'd like it. So I told him I'd bring that up. So that's my only concern, is that we're gonna have that development, probably people living in it for a year and a half with limited opportunity, I guess. So any other comments, John?
Well, so, and we can bring back more details about that when we come back with the final version. And so I think that would be helpful to know what you're saying, Mayor, is what the realistic expectation is from RAMP. Because usually you apply for it and the funds aren't even available at that instant. It's a delay on that. And so I think you're right. It's good to have the council fully understand the timeline so we know what the expectations are.
If I hear correctly, the council's preference is to develop the entire piece all at one time and currently just deposit the money in. I would suggest that that money is restricted, obviously for this purpose. Government has sometimes a tendency to get confused which monies go where. So I would hope that this could be restricted funds. So any other questions, comments, council? I think John has a good point of what would the overall timeframe be. I think there is the risk, although I believe that RAMP does enjoy having money out on parks. But if not, we're obligated to either give all the money back or make a substantial investment ourselves. So with that, if there's no other questions, I'd be looking for a motion then. Well, John, I think you said we weren't looking for a decision tonight, even though there's an agreement number here.
Right. That's correct, that we don't need the agreement approved tonight.
We'll go with the reason.
Yeah, we'll bring it back in April with the rezone and do it all in one ball of wax.
All right, and John, have we got independent bids to see what we think that would cost, just to make sure? I know
I don't know the numbers, but I know that Lauren as well as Tiffany have been asking for estimated costs on different types of park improvements.
okay.
So I don't know that we have the numbers back.
Yeah, I think it would be good for the council to know the full amount of commitment we're potentially making here before we finalize that decision. So, okay, is that all right, council?
Sounds good.
Is that adequate direction, John?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll go on then to item number 8 on our agenda, which is a discussion or action to consider an ordinance to amend the parking setback and landscape buffer requirements. Our associate planner, Brandon Bell.
Should we do 7?
We skipped that. Sorry, Brandon, I gotta go back one. I skipped 7. I wrote over it in a little note here, sorry. John, lead us in a discussion concerning the potential purchase agreement for land located at approximately 360 East Pleasant View Drive.
Thank you, Mayor. So council, this has come to you before. You essentially gave a head nod that you would be open to exploring this option with the Coldwater Animal Hospital and the pediatric dentist in the basement. It might be easier to show the site plan. This is the most recent version of the site plan. because I'm not hitting the right button. The idea is the city owns everything to the west of this line. And what they are looking for is to be the ability to expand their parking lot so their staff and patrons have more parking options, as well as utilizing this entrance that currently exists. And with the proposed agreement, they've offered the city $30,000. The exact square footage isn't identified yet because we need a surveyor to go out there and indicate it. There's some weird property lines in this area. Technically, the Utah Road Commission owns a sliver of property in this area, for example. But in theory, that's what's being proposed, as well as the ability for two cross-access easements. One is for individuals to use this entrance to come into the city or into the animal hospital and dentist parking lot, as well as for the city to be able to go up this hill. We do own property up here that we don't go up that hill a lot, but we do need to occasionally. And so that would also be tied into the closing. But what before you is essentially the amount of $30,000, as well as the concept of this space, although the shape will likely tweak a little bit. That would at least give the ability for the animal hospital owners, and Dr. Val is here with us tonight, or Dr. Pohl, to answer any questions you may have. But it essentially gives them enough of confidence that they can go out and engage a surveyor and spend a little more money on engineering and stuff. And so the question is just, does the council want to keep going this direction? I think from a staff perspective, we've looked at the site plan. It meets most of our standards, assuming you pass some of the things that maybe Brandon might talk to you about in a few minutes. But I also know, I think council, you probably received an email or two about people with concerns over this. And so it'd be good to provide some direction to the animal hospital owners on where the council's thinking.
Thank you, John. Could you address, obviously, if Pleasant View Drive ultimately gets closed, the effect it would have on this?
I can tell you my interpretation of it. So there's two options. If Pleasant View Drive ever got closed, we would still have a need to provide access to the lower parking lot. There are three options, or really four, although one of them I think is going away. One option is to do I'm not sharing this to the public in general. I forgot to share my screen. One option is to do a cul-de-sac on this end so that all the business traffic can come in off Washington Boulevard to access the parking lot, and this entrance would go away. Another option is to come in off the back end with a cul-de-sac here, and here's an entrance to the lower parking lot. A third option, and obviously we're not suggesting any of these things tonight, so don't feel like we're saying you have to do any of these things, is to provide for a connection here. This would require a lot of grading and a lot of loss of landscape, and including some trees. The fourth option, which in some ways is not as possible with the proposed expansion of the building, would have been to do an access point here. Each one of these plans has positives and negatives for the city as well as for the neighboring landowners. And so, but there is, even if the road is closed, there are still viable ways to make the connection. It would just be a conversation with the landowners at that time if the council was heading that direction.
And I'm not proposing that it will be closed. I just think we need to keep our options open, particularly with potential development in the city and traffic flow and things of that nature. I just hate to see that option taken away. So I don't know if the landowners there are open to having that unknown with how this takes place. By the way, John, how tall is that rock wall?
I don't think we measured it, but it is pre-existing to our 8-foot maximum requirement.
Oh, okay, just checking.
So it's not grandfathered in, but it was legal at the time it was built.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Any questions regards to John's presentation? I think some had the opportunity to go visit the site the other day and look at it. Anything else, John?
I think that the question would just be, is the council willing to authorize the mayor to enter into the real estate purchase agreement for $30,000? Knowing that there'll be a future agreement that comes to the council for the cross access, as well as future decisions on rezones and things that would come back as well.
Councilman Delpas, so you have a question?
John, do you know at least what the estimated square footage of the lot or acreage of it is? Because I feel like I don't know how comfortable we can feel with a number without knowing for sure what the acreage is. Does that make sense? So what's your best guess or your closest estimate?
So the original number that we talked about, I believe, was 4,200 square feet. That sound right, Doctor?
I think it's, yeah, I don't know if that's correct. There's 0.18.
It's a tenth, yeah, that is about right, it's a tenth of an acre, so that's about right.
But I think that with, I think the original number we talked about was 25,000 as well. And so there's been a slight increase in the property in this area. So we might be closer to 40 or 5,500 square feet, but we'll bring those details back. And so I think it's in that $5 to $6 a square foot range, which, to put that in perspective, is about 200,000 to 240 an acre. If the council would like to set a parameters on exactly what the price per square foot is, that it is appropriate to do a purchase contract that says this is the price per square foot we want, and so it's based on how many square feet you get. That's a very common practice. The REPC that was in your packet hasn't been signed yet, so it's not in any sort of the mayor wouldn't be the first one to sign it. First, we'd get it signed by the partners with Shoup Holdings. So whatever direction the council wanted, or parameters the council wanted to set for the mayor, that would be entirely appropriate at this time.
Thanks, comment. Okay.
Just a sec, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Councilman Severing, do you have a?
Well, I'm just curious about how, Dr. Paul, how do you feel about this nebulous idea that there's a chance that Pleasant View Drive could be closed, even though we would still provide access? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have a crystal ball for all of us, I think. We've had the benefit and the disadvantage of having it closed for a long time during construction, so it was difficult to not have the amount of access that we are used to. But, you know, we're to the point where we have to be good neighbors and say, we need to conduct business. As long as there's a way for our clients to get in and out of the parking lot, we can conduct business. The shape of the roundabout or whatever that, whatever we need to do to make that happen, then that's what we need to do.
and then I was just curious on the REPC. So is this is not the REPC we're using, right, John?
Well, so this was the draft version that was sent over by the owners. And so it's not the final version because it would come with a signature from the buyers.
Because I noticed most of the due diligence deadlines are passed. And
Right.
there's not technically, you need to have a consideration. But I was just curious, Dr. Paul, thank you. I'm personally not in favor of their ever closing down Pleasant View because I think it cuts off a section of the city. And if we talk about there needing to be effective travel from this place to another, I don't think that's the wisest idea. But as long as you're in a situation where that could possibly occur.
Yeah, I don't think our discussion is about closing that tonight, Councilmember
Oh, I know it wasn't.
Severing, and I would just say, making a decision before we get all the information may be a little difficult because there are some certain things happening in the city we may have to put traffic down there to get a light for development in our city. So I think, I just want to keep the option open.
Well, Mayor, that's what I meant was if that's an option, I mean, if you know that that's a potential and you're still willing to enter into the agreement.
As long as there's access to the parking lots, then we can conduct business.
Which I think we're legally obligated to do, so we would do that. Any other comments? Councilmember Delpaz, I know you weren't on the council at the time, but we looked at that piece of property, what would we ultimately do with it? It's pretty limited what we can do. I know we just sold commercial property for probably a net 15, 16 bucks a foot, but I don't think this is developable property. John, I don't know what we would do with it.
It would be hard to do a structure and associated parking. There's an easement that runs directly, my pointer, right here that we would not be able to build on, that services the cell tower. But it doesn't mean it's not useful. Obviously, there's some marketable use because it allows for parking for this site or this site.
The reason I asked that question is I know Councilmember Severing has always said, should we be selling any property the city owns? And so I just want to make sure that he has the information in that regard, but it'd be very difficult. I think its highest and best use is as designed here. And hopefully would increase your opportunity for growth in your business. Councilmember Severing, did you have another comment?
Well, I would agree with you, Mayor. If it's a piece of ground that I think we need to keep and that its highest and best use could be seen in the future, then yes, I'm a fan of keeping the ground, but this is the highest and best use is selling it to the sheep holding. So I'm very agreeable with that.
Councilmember Barker, do you have any comments? Councilmember Ekstrom, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, just some questions for Dr. Paul. How does this get you what you need, and how has it been? I haven't been to take my animals since we've had all of the construction, but generally your veterinary clinic is the upper parking lot, right? Are you going to have access now to your facility from the lower one also?
Yeah, so this will be for staff parking. And
Okay.
then all of our clients can park up close to the facility, both for the vet hospital and the dentist's office. So staff, this is exclusively going to be staff.
Okay, so this is staff parking down here. And then the upper parking, again, I'm trying to picture, do we have left hand off of Washington, or everybody has to come down the hill and turn right into your parking lot?
There's some left hand, there's left.
There's left hand, okay. Because I was like,
Yeah,
oh.
you can do it.
Okay, well, very good. I'm okay with the 30,000 for the block of whatever it is. I don't necessarily think we need to nickel and dime and worry about a price per square foot and go down to the square foot. I'm okay with that. Can't speak for everybody else, but that's fine with me.
And just a reminder for us all, if we look at the general plan does show Pleasant View Drive closed. And I understand in a recent meeting that somebody stated this was a dream of Mayor Taylor that needed to be fulfilled. So just putting that out on the table, but that is in the general plan. And so we'll go from there. Just appreciate that. Do you have any other comments? Mr. Paul?
So, we started.
Do you want to come up here, please?
We'd started with the lower purchase price number and we bounced it back and said, hey, we're more comfortable with the 30,000, that's fine. The easement, when I talked to John, rather than, there's some gravel, there are some asphalts that can poor shape. So we want to go over to that easement because nothing's going to be built there in the future anyway, just to make a nicer transition. So that's why it went a little bit to the west. So I think at one point in time, we said maybe we won't have the cross property easement, but Public Works said we really do need it to get up that hill. So that's why we brought that back on the table. So.
Anything else you'd like the council to know? Any other questions, council, before we seek a motion on agreement A05-2022? If there are no further questions, I would look for a motion.
Mayor, I move that we accept agreement A 5 twenty twenty-two, entering into a purchase agreement for excess property with Shoop Holdings.
Okay, and do we have a second to that motion?
I second that, Mayor.
Councilmember Severing, any further discussion? I think this, John, you'll bring back the final purchase agreement. This is just to authorize the,
Yes,
Yes,
authorize the general terms. Yeah.
all right, we'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
and Councilmember Dalpas.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to item number 8, Brandon. I apologize.
Evening, Mayor and members of the council. So this is a minor text amendment being proposed to our city zoning code. This proposal relates to our current essentially setback requirements for parking lots and landscaping requirements. They're referred to as parking setback and landscape buffers. I'll go ahead and read the decision type statement for legislative decisions, which this is. When the city is considering a legislative matter, the planning commission acts as a recommending body to the city council. The city has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions require that the planning commission give a recommendation again to the city council, and typically the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. Staff's been reviewing the requirements for parking lot setback and landscape buffer requirements from both city, from property lines adjoining city right of ways and also property lines in general. So those other property lines would be just property lines that adjoin an adjoining parcel that's not a street, but like a property owner that's a neighbor to the north or south or east or west. There are 2 applications that are currently being considered that this would affect. One of them is actually the purchase, the potential purchase that was just discussed, and the site plan that has already been reviewed by the planning commission for that project. And then also the city has the police station, which is currently being proposed, and this would allow that to be in conformity with this. But in general, as staff has reviewed this section of our city ordinance, we find that the current ordinance is a little bit excessive in the requirements. There are times when zoning standards are based on sort of a certain design aesthetic, and that design aesthetic accomplishes, quality landscapes, things like that. But there may be a way to achieve a quality result without as such a high level of requirements or burden that if those requirements are a little bit too heavy, they can be burdensome. And so staff is of the opinion that this proposed adjustment would reduce the requirements while maintaining quality for a buffer around proposed parking lots. So there'd still be a required buffer. The changes would be that instead of 20 foot generally of any parking lot from a property line with that 20 feet being occupied by some form of landscaping, the proposed change is that the 20 foot be kept in place for Washington Boulevard and other arterials and collectors specified in the North Ogden City General Plan, but reduce the setback for parking lots to 14 feet from back of curb along other streets. So any other street that's not an arterial or Washington Boulevard or collector would go to 14 feet. And then for property lines where the property line where the property that the parking lot is on, it adjoins another regular piece of property that's just another property owner. Staff is suggesting that should be able to reasonably be reduced to 10 feet with a landscape buffer. That gives enough distance for, say, a truck bed or another car to be able to hang over the parking lot and not have it, encroaching onto the existing property, and then provide a few feet extra just for a buffer. So, and then just as one sort of housekeeping note, when staff originally prepared this ordinance, we proposed eliminating maximum widths on parking entrances, but we reconsidered, whereas the prior version of the ordinance proposed to remove those from the amendment, and staff has rethought that, felt that that should go back in. That's the version that's in front of you tonight. That's for the entrances and exits to parking lot onto a street. So we reconsidered that and thought, well, we want to keep the maximum in so that we don't have an applicant propose something that's really, really wide, particularly on Washington, and put excess asphalt onto it. So onto the site. So that's a pretty minor part of the ordinance, but I want to bring it to your attention since it had been adjusted since the time of the Planning Commission. And then I think that covers my report on this. I'll just close with the recommendation from the Planning Commission and staff's thoughts. The Planning Commission recommended unanimously that this ordinance amendment be approved. Staff recommends that the City Council conduct a review of and discussion regarding the proposed amendment and consider whether they believe the ordinance amendment should be adopted. So those are all of my thoughts. Do you have questions for me?
Council, any questions? Brandon, any questions?
I'm kind of a visual thinker, so I'm just trying to picture. So we're keeping the 20-foot on Washington, and then what are the general arterials that you're considering?
Along arterials and collectors, it would also remain 20 feet, but then.
Okay, give me an example. What
So
road?
I think that like Monroe and one of the Loman Views is, or I don't remember which one it is, but like Loman View or Pleasant View Drive is a collector, one of them. There's only maybe 6 or 7 in the city that they apply to, but Washington would be the main one, and then probably 2600 would be another one.
3100.
Yeah. Mhm.
Woman View, Alberta Drive. That makes sense.
Yeah. So
Okay, yeah, that does seem to be more reasonable. I like things that are reasonable. Sounds good.
Brandon, you made a comment that this would affect the purchase of the property. Those are both on arterial and collector, Pleasant View and Washington Boulevard. So what would that change? They're just trying to,
well, so on this,
getting a vision of.
there's also the provision that relates to the 10 feet from a property line generally, and I think that that's where this would affect this application. I'd have to go back and look at the staff report. I didn't refamiliarize myself with that, but I think that that's the main issue there, is that there's currently 20 feet is required from any property line, even if it's not a street. So it's just next to, like, say, a residential home that's in the back of it. If you've ever been on the backside of Smith's, they've got a big wide buffer, and you need something kind of similar to that. That's probably an extreme example because it is pretty big. But the point is, what we're saying is that 20 feet isn't necessary where you're not facing a street, and the 20 feet is only necessary along collectors or arterials. 14 should be good for regular streets and that are non-collector, non-arterial, and then 10 when it's just adjoining a neighbor. So does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I just wanted to kind of get a visual,
It's that back.
that west
that
part.
The north part of that.
By the cell?
Yeah, it's currently 20, just to make it.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
Any questions, further questions, council? All right, then I would be looking for a motion to amend the parking setback and landscape buffer requirements as explained by our associate planner, Mr. Bell. This would be ordinance number 2022-07, I believe. Is that right, Joyce? Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mayor, I'll move that we approve ordinance 2022-07 to amend the parking setback and landscape buffer requirements.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Councilmember Dalpez. Is there any further discussion? Brandon, got everything out you needed? All right, we have a motion and a second. Take a roll call vote. Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Severin,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes,
Councilmember Delapass.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously on a 4-0 vote. We'll now go on to item number 9. Scott Hess will be leading this discussion. Scott is our planning director. And this is a discussion regarding adding 2-family dwellings back into the RCC zone. Scott?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So for tonight, this is a discussion item only. There's no action to be taken other than to provide guidance back to the planning department, potentially bring an ordinance or change direction. So this was a discussion that went in front of the planning commission. It's been a while ago, actually. We've had some time between when this went forward. I'm going to find it actually. I think it was January 5th today. The planning commission, on the heels of providing a recommendation on a future general land use map, had kind of a laundry list of items. And one of those is there's a section of the city that's residential city center, as well as reaching north along Washington Boulevard or 400 up to Lowman View Cemetery, 1 block to the east and back down, that was recommended for 2-family dwellings. So staff in kind of trying to lead up to the adoption or the potential adoption of the future land use map brought forward a discussion on 2-family dwellings because we had a recommendation forwarded. Planning Commission had a pretty healthy discussion about this and weighed the merits of both 2-family dwellings, which are separatable units. You can have individually owned, individually rented, and may be owned by a single entity, and weighed the merits of that versus the current accessory dwelling unit standard, which permits an in-home attached accessory dwelling unit to any existing single-family home. So in a sense, every single-family home in North Ogden and in the state of Utah right now can be a duplex. You can put a basement apartment, you can build out on the back so long as you can meet all of the other size and setback requirements. They felt like that, that coupled again with some comments from folks who lived in the neighborhood helped, made them feel like they'd be more confident in expanding the opportunities for accessory dwelling units to include maybe the exterior or detached dwelling units, accessory dwelling units to be permitted on lots smaller than 20,000 square feet. That's currently the cap. Or, do more sales pitch or marketing from the city on, you have the opportunity to put an ADU in your property. That's one way to tackle the moderate income housing component for the city. There's other options to provide different types of housing, and 2-family dwellings was a long-standing use in the RCC zone. So you have a number of them there. In the staff report, I showed a couple of different options or variations for how you can have a 2-family dwelling. You can have a single lot with a single structure that is owned and kind of lived in 2 different sides, or you can actually split the structure down the middle. You'd retain the overall lot width of, say, the residential city center zone of 80 feet. You would construct one structure and then you split that down the middle. So basically each person owns 40 feet of frontage, but as you drive up and down the road, you see a single structure on an 80-foot wide lot. Those are all over the city. You have Roylance Farms, which is off of 2000 North, just north of Village at Prominence Point, has a number of those. Lakeview Heights has them, and then Woodfield subdivision, which is south off 1700. The city has a lot of examples of existing 2-family dwellings, and so I want to bring this forward to the council. The planning commission ultimately, again, it was a discussion item, but they voice voted essentially unanimously to keep retain the standard as it is, no 2-family dwellings in the RCC zone, and to better communicate or look at standards around accessory dwelling units. And I felt like it was, as the council being the legislative body who would ultimately weigh in on it, wanted to provide you an opportunity to give staff direction to confirm that or tell us to go back and look at standards we think are reasonable to bring an ordinance forward permitting 2-family dwellings.
Thank you, Scott, for your succinct presentation. Any questions for Scott? I think we all recognize that there is a need for housing. Frankly, I don't know how we're ever going to catch up with the legislature continuing to incentivize people to come into our state when we're already 45,000 homes short and taking over a year to build a residence now almost. I don't know how we'll ever catch up. You know, my only concern is on these auxiliary dwelling units. I like the idea, but if you think about it, it could dramatically increase the pressure on our infrastructure with no additional revenue.
Yeah.
Because people are living in basements or whatever. I wish that there was something that would require the county to reassess that property because values go up when there's rental income associated with it. But that's my concern. How do we do that? Because literally our population could double if everybody did that with no additional revenues to cover the cost of soft infrastructure. But, the planning commission, as you saw in your packet, I think they also recommended if the council wanted to proceed with this, that at least one of the units would have to be owner occupied, like an ADU. So it would require at least the owner to live on the property. I don't know how you would ever enforce that and what the consequences would be if
Yeah.
somebody wasn't living on the property.
I mean, aside from entering into development agreements on a lot by lot basis, I think that's about the only way you'd be able to do it. So right now you could, as a developer, build an entire subdivision and own that entire subdivision as rentals. And we have developers who do that, and developers who developed in North Ogden own subdivision wide rentals. So there's no restriction on that if it's a single family box sitting on the ground, but once it's that attached dwelling, there's a fear about.
Well, and I'm surely not against rental, but I think as I read through the planning commission's discussion, they felt that that ownership would keep the property more up to standards than not. I think we've had several residents comment upon the fact that what's happened when it's that. So council, what feedback would you like to give Scott at this point in time? Should he pursue adding 2 family dwellings, or would you like more information, more requirements? I believe, Scott, we had quite a discussion on this with some residents just up here with the house that they grew up in, and
The rezone that's been deferred. Yeah,
we've had numerous discussions on that.
Yeah, same residents came out and expressed those concerns about, they like the owner occupied option for it, and they want to maintain the RCC zone as a standard single family zone, even though it really is comprised of, over decades, a mix of housing types up there.
Yeah, some by accident, I understand. What does the general plan say about this area, Scott?
The RCC zone, when you read it, still says 2 family dwellings in it, in the purpose statement of the RCC zone. And that's not codified language you can lean back on. So the general plan is supportive of that area of our town due to its proximity to services, civic services, in having a mix of housing types.
Well, it would seem like to me, we can't pick and choose what we want to follow in the general plan. I know there's some potential amendments coming with your leadership and some of the general plan committee folks. So I would entertain any questions, but I would like to see what the general plan gets amended to, because I think, picking and choosing gets us in a little trouble.
Yeah. And that'll be coming back in 2 weeks, I believe. So we're post legislative session now. We know what the fallout was from those folks and their land use changes. So we'll have that discussion, and then I could accept feedback at that point as far as next codified steps or whatever we need to do.
Yeah. I know we kind of were waiting to see what came out of the legislature and then to see the land use map and the general plan. So I think that would be helpful before I make the decision, but I think we need to decide, does it have to be owner occupied if there's 2 dwellings? I think that's what is required on the ADU, right? It has to be owner occupied by at least one of the residents. Any questions or directions for Mr. Hess? Councilmember Ekstrom, looks like you have something you'd like to say.
I always form a preliminary opinion, and then when I get more information, I'm like, "Ooh, that was a very good opinion to form." But I hate to put something in our code that is not enforceable. So I would say the owner occupied thing needs to have some form of enforcement available. Otherwise, it's just, I don't know. I don't like to say, it's like, well, it's there, but nobody does it. You know, so I like the idea of it. So maybe we can come up with some sort of wording and
Yeah, that's my question. I mean, how do you enforce that?
Business license.
You know,
How do you know if they don't move out?
That's what the ADA.
yeah, that's, how do you know if it's not owner
You can
occupied?
keep your name on the title and not move out and rent it out. And how do we know?
yeah, we've got somebody in our neighborhood that does that.
Townhomes are the same way.
So
Yeah, I don't know
That's
how.
I'll think about how you do a single-sided owner occupied, but what that, in effect, what that does is it takes one person who may have been able to afford an affordable unit. Because what you're really doing is halving the land costs and sort of cutting the construction costs in half because you're building half of one structure, but
So it's only
Same.
600,000 instead of
There you go.
800.
It's 600 instead of
Awesome.
800.
affordable.
But
Awesome.
if you require owner occupied, then you need somebody who can finance, purchase, and live in a $1.2 million structure, and then rent out that other half to cover the portion of the now inflated cost of the purchase price of that house. Like it's the same issue with, I think every new home, this is personal, this isn't planning director. I think every new house built should have a basement entrance and a basement kitchen plumbing ready to go. I think that would be great. State caught up, if they said every house should have an ADU, then
You've been
They
talking
can
to my
number-
wife. I mean, that's where that idea came from.
so, but again, the same issue exists of if you want to build a home with an accessory kitchen in the basement, you just double the cost of your kitchen and fixtures and space that you're doing, you know, all of these things. And so your $800,000 house turns into $1 million overnight just by doing that. And then you have to hope that your rents will offset the cost. So that by doing that, I worry it doesn't actually meet the intent of providing more modern income housing.
Why don't you come back then, Scott, with your recommendation? It seems like it's hard to enforce, like Councilmember Barker indicated, but I'm gonna hold you responsible for the additional 200,000. Just want you to know that. Councilmember Barker.
So my concern, if we're gonna require owner occupied, what's the difference between that and an ADU?
There really isn't.
There isn't, and so, and then, and like we've already said, then it's no longer affordable. And I've learned in my short time, if you start regulating too much, then the legislature will come out and say, you now are gonna have to accept this. So I like more, let's give more housing options, more variety, instead of producing, we're being told it would be open.
I'm still looking for the definition of affordable, so
Well,
you
I
can
never,
help me
I
with that.
said more, or how, different housing types.
Yeah, I think you threw in the word affordable
There's no
there.
such thing as affordable.
Not anymore.
Thank you.
I've taken notes on that.
I know the county requires an ADU to be owner occupied,
Yeah, we do as well.
so I don't know how we enforce that either. So, but if you could come back with some ideas, then I think we can go from there. And also, I think it'd be helpful for the council to have the recommendation of the general plan committee and the land use map. Then we can go from there. Is that okay, council?
Yeah, Mayor, I'll let you make a
Go
comment.
ahead, Councilmember Sedley.
So Councilman Barker, you're saying you're okay with this change?
It's already
To
there.
permit-
It's already there.
There's a lot of them there. We're not changing, I mean, it got taken away. We're just putting it back.
We're just putting it back.
Yeah.
That's what I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
that.
they're already there. There's a bunch of them in there. I mean, there's a new one that was built on 2600. There's ones on 600 East, just off 2600. They're there. But
By accident.
That one on 2600, I think, is
yeah, that
a
was,
prime example of what it could be.
yeah,
that
and
one's
it's
maintained
nice.
nice.
It's nice. I drive that by that
Mhm.
house every day, or that duplex every
Yeah,
day.
why don't you get back to us on that? It might be nice to hear from the neighbors again. I know there was quite a bit of concern about that, but let's see what the general plan committee comes back with too, and what the general plan looks like.
Mayor,
Councilmember Dalpass.
I watched that planning commission meeting and there was a ton of resident input, to your point. So I would encourage anyone on the city council, like if you hadn't had a chance to watch that YouTube, go back to it and just get a feel for what people were thinking. I think that's why it kind of went the ADU direction. And so it was fairly highly because of the resident input.
But they wanted townhomes first.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
the,
that was it, but they wanted that corner up on 500 East, 450 East, whatever it is. They wanted to first do townhomes, right? And then turned into another plan because of this whole conversation.
Yeah. Scott, does that give you enough direction to confuse you?
yeah, that's great.
All right. We've accomplished our objective then,
We
apparently.
can go home now.
Almost. All right, thank you so much, Scott, for spending some time with us tonight and well thought through. And again, thanks for your succinct presentation. All right. Let's move on to item number 10, why Scott here is at the podium. He wants to discuss action regarding the city code, chapter 11 and 12 rewrite, all 300 pages. So Scott, why don't you proceed?
Let's commence with the less succinct presentation now. No, I don't want to belabor this. This is in 2019, the city entered into a contract with Logan Simpson to bring on a consultant to look at reorganization of our Title 11 land use code and Title 12 subdivision code. So in effect, what we have here is a combination of the two codes, clarification in the chapters, elimination of kind of extraneous information, duplicated information, and a cleanup of our code. And codes are messy. I mean, we're in here all the time talking about these and writing standards. I'm gonna beat you to it, Mayor, because John already texted me, but
Oh,
so
no,
for
I want to see
example-
who else read.
Okay,
I want
okay.
to see who else read it.
Given the code as I wrote it in apparently the middle of the night in a sleepy haste, how tall now can a propane tank be in the C2 zone?
1,260 feet.
Oops.
We went from 25 to 50, didn't we just do that?
And the number of gallons, Mayor?
Oh, let's see if someone else can answer that.
Well, I know what it should be.
What should it be?
Oh, no, it's what it is.
1,000. No, it's 5,000,001,000
Yeah,
It's all right.
because I added. I accidentally
you're not
added.
perfect, Scott, but you did a great job.
So what we did is, in having kind of inherited this code, there was a lag time of my just learning and ramping up of the city generally. And then we went back through as staff and amended in all of the zoning text amendments that have happened since 2019, because they had a base code. And we've gone back through and tried to add all of those changes. And just in the time that I've been here in 9 or 10 months, there have been a number of those, probably half a dozen or more zoning text amendments that we've done. So we tried to roll those back in. There are inevitably going to be typos, minor mistakes, things like that we catch. And staff would ask if, should this be approved tonight, that the council grant myself, John, and Susan Nance the ability to correct those as we codify them. And then also just, I guess, kind of grant a little bit of understanding that this will likely be back. You know, this isn't a one and done. We'll begin to use it and realize things that we forgot or missed, or that I 1,000 times to the standard of something, and we'll bring it back. Another thing just to be aware of, there were a few, I don't want to say judgment calls in here, but there's some changes. So one is our R3, R2, R3, and R4 zone. Currently, there's no density calculation in there. There's no like maximum density. So you do it based on this calculus of your developable property and then so many square feet per unit, and you divide it backwards down through, and I gave you all that spreadsheet when I did the general plan. And it calculates out to about 12 and a half units if you have the perfect piece of property, perfectly square piece of property, flat, no other encumbrances. And in John and I, in looking through this and the way it's easier now to calculate density, but what we did is we took R4 and we said maximum of 15 dwelling units per acre. So there's a slight increase over what it is today. That's probably, that's something you can weigh in on. And I think that the R3 was 12 units per acre because our R15, you can get close, R15 in the small zones where you go 4,000 square foot per unit, you can get over 10 units per acre. So if there's no appreciable difference between single family residential R15 and R3, then that R3 zone is really ineffective or not useful. So there's a slight, I'd say a slight net density increase in the potential for those R4 units or R4 eligible properties in the city. Other than that, there weren't any real judgment calls. I mean, we went through and we just tried to codify everything as it was and clarify the code. And some things we're bringing it up to standards. We have a did you know we have a chicken license requirement for $5 that I don't think it's ever been collected. And so that's been pulled out to bring it into the way we do business in the city. And
Maybe they could pay with eggs or something. I mean, I don't know.
but I don't want to, I really don't want to go through everything here. It was a very well done.
And Scott, believe me, we don't want you to go through all 300 pages. But Scott, just a question, is it up to, say, 15 units per acre? So the council would have, based upon the layout of the land, by development agreement, could probably say if 12 fits better, 11, the council would still have that, even though it's codified up to 15.
Right.
And here's my ultimate question, and this is the challenge I gave Mr. Call when we did this, since I've recently discovered what government can do to you. There's things in there that I'm not sure make a lot of sense. Now, I'm not a planner or whatever, but my question is, did we really look at this with a set of eyes to take out stuff that's irrelevant?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't here for the whole.
Well, let me ask Mr. Call.
Reorganization process.
Mr. Call, did you look at that with the eyes of taking out things that made it difficult, that were irrelevant?
That was the attempt. In fact, we took out about 62 pages of code. So it is still 250 pages long, but we took out 62 pages of irrelevance.
Was it irrelevance or duplication?
A little of both.
All
But
right.
we did look at all the processes. A good example is the process to like appeal decisions was really convoluted and confusing. And by this reorganization, we put it into one spot that says, hey, if you want to go through the process, here it is, one spot, really clear.
So is that a yes, John?
Yes, that's a yes.
So we eliminated stuff that's irrelevant?
Yes. but
And
I'm
there's
sure
probably more in there,
there'll be
right?
more in there.
Okay, good. All right. So Mr. Hess has asked this council to approve tonight City Code chapters 11 and 12 rewrite, subject to modifications that are non-substantive, that are grammatical or something of that nature, without having to come back to the council. I do think it would be wise, though, to keep track of those and let the council know what was changed, just so they feel the substance was not changed. So any questions from Mr. Hess?
Scott, thank you for all.
Councilman Severin.
Yep, sorry. Thank you, Scott, for all that you do. You and Brandon doing it, and the department does. I thought I heard Mike Ostermiller, who is the CEO and real estate attorney out of the board in that Northern Wasatch. I heard him talking the other day about something in this legislative session where they talked about simplifying and making the language a little bit more, okay, maybe a lot more understandable. Would you clarify that for me? Is that something that I heard that's accurate?
Yeah, there's a laundry list of, so our land use code is LUDMA, Land Use Development Management Act of the state. And there were, House Bill 303 had a whole laundry list of LUDMA changes, from notice changes to simplifying and clarifying language. And making it layperson language. So we will have work to do on the heels of this legislative session in our code, whether we did this reorganization or not. There's some things to do that we'll probably go through it, but I guess in my 15 years of planning, when the legislature passes something like that, the trickle down effect is not all 285 cities and towns in the state of Utah is gonna go through their entire code and change all the language. There's probably things that are difficult to understand. I mean, for me, being a planner and trying to figure out how many dwelling units per acre you can get on a piece of R4 ground was hard. You had to reference multiple sections. You had to do a calculation on it. That's a lot simpler now, as well as like John said, we have almost a decision tree in a spreadsheet now of who the person is, where the land use authority lies, what the appeal process would be, and that's very clearly outlined and stated. So I think there is some simplification and clarification, but that's a hard one. I mean, if you're not, it's still legal language, and we can write it as simply as possible, but it still won't be understandable for all.
And there's some terms of art like setback. If you don't, the definitions tell you what a setback is, but if you don't use that regularly, you might not know exactly what it means. So it's this give and take.
Yeah.
Scott, is it true that John suggested the litmus test would be having the mayor read it, and if he understood it, that would be simple? Is that
You
true?
didn't say that to me.
Well, I heard that he said that. Councilmember Ekstrom?
Yes, I have to say, it's been sitting all 300 and some odd printed pages sitting in my library. And I did start to read it, and I can tell you it was better than a sleeping pill. I like clunk. So if you can get through it, more power to you. And thank you for the editing job, because that's a lot of work to try and look it through something. I mean, I was likening it with John to the tax code. It's like, okay, getting this through. So thank you for making it more understandable. Thank you for actually working to understand it and then saying, okay, Cliff notes it for me, and hopefully that's kind of your approach here, so that, any person can come in and really know what they need to do looking at it. So.
And now Brandon and I will have the task of relearning an entire city code, because all the references and numbers and locations of everything are all new now.
Any other questions, council? I just had a thought, Scott. Has anyone ever looked at our code and determined what's unique to us versus surrounding cities?
I don't know. I mean, every zone that we put in, like our, 5 million gallon propane regulations. That's probably
I like that, by the way. That was pretty awesome. I was thinking, but I'm just, from the standpoint that we don't want to be the outlier when people are looking at trying to make decisions. We surely want to keep our city a great place to live, but sometimes if we are too difficult, that word spreads fairly rapidly. And as you know, more difficulty means more costs generally. So I'm just wondering if we've ever done that to say, do we have unique things in our code that are just unique to our city?
Well, so not every city has done this, as well as I think Rob Scott did, testament to the work that he did in the code when LEPMA changed, is say elimination of all of the blanket conditional use permits. We, as cities across the state, used to have a list of permitted uses and a list of conditional uses. And when the state came down and said conditional uses are permitted uses with conditions, most cities, the cities that were doing smart planning, eliminated their conditional use permits and wrote specific standards for any of those that they felt had concerns. So that's something that the city did to eliminate a barrier. And then the change that we have in the Title 11 and 12 now is that final plats will be administrative. So where you have all this preliminary work and improvements done, and oftentimes you have entire subdivisions ready to sell lots, and that developer's ready to market them and then realizes that they've got to wait 3 weeks to get on a planning commission meeting and meet notice requirements and all of that. That'll now be an administrative process, which will speed up and help that final plat process, which at that point is really done.
which I think is good. That's one of the things we talked about is removing as much, not that we don't trust the planning commission, we really appreciate all they do. But we'd like them to concentrate on higher level things, and we have, trust in you and Brandon and Kai. There's a lot of things that will not impair keeping North Ogden a great place to live that you guys can handle.
Right.
So if you continue to see some of those, don't be afraid to bring them up and let's do that. So any other questions? All right, we'd be looking then to approve the implementation of the rewrite of the chapter 11 and 12 of the city code. I'd be looking for a motion to approve that.
So moved.
So moved by Councilmember Ekstrom. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions? I see none, so we'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Dowpass,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
4-0 vote. You now have that approval, Scott, and we'll look forward to continued modification and improvement on that. We'll now move on to item number 11. Council, as you know, after 39 years, Pat Lambert retired as our Justice Court Judge. We've gone through the process where appointed committee, we had 2 members on that, and the 3 members that we didn't have any input on, they have made a recommendation, narrowed that down to 4 applicants. I've had a chance to interview each one of the applicants, all very qualified. I had the opportunity to, John and myself, to speak with Laura, who was very involved in our Justice Court and took into consideration her comments. So tonight I'd like to present the name of Michael Junk to be our Justice Court Judge. Mr. Junk is also the Justice Court Judge of Ogden City. I tried to make it very clear that we're used to not being stepchildren here and that we expect his full attention, and he's committed to do that. So I would present his name this evening for your consideration and would be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Junk was a prosecutor, I believe, chief for Ogden City for a number of years.
He was with Harrisville as well.
In Harrisville, and has served, I think, as the Justice Court Judge for approximately 5 years in Ogden. Be happy to answer any questions. If not, I'd be looking for a motion to appoint Mr. Junk as the North Ogden Justice Court Judge. Looking for a motion?
I motion that we approve Michael Junk as our justice. What's the wording? As our court judge.
Yes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Ekstrom. Any further discussion? I would just say it was a difficult decision. There were some very qualified candidates, and I'm hoping that those will have opportunities. I think some of them are finalists in other cities. So with that, I would seek a roll call vote for that approval. Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Councilmember Dowpass.
Yes.
Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
And Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
A motion passes on a 4-0 vote. We'll now move on to item number 12. Is a discussion and our action to consider a resolution related to the city council rules and procedures. Our presenter will be John Call, our city manager and attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. So council, this is a document that I know you've read through because we've received comments from you about various sections. Susan and I, Susan is listening, went through the items and tried to culminate all the comments into one document. There were some sections that we felt like the council might need to discuss more. And so if you'd like to, And so we'll just go down through the changes that are being suggested. The first one is there's a discussion about under Rule 1, subsection 4. It basically indicates that the mayor should receive all communication from the council to staff and vice versa. And this is something that we haven't historically followed in a way that restricts people who work for the city from being able to communicate with the council, or the council from communicating with them. And so I think what Councilman Swanson was suggesting here is that maybe this section needs to be amended in a way that makes sense and clarifies exactly what communication is appropriate. I think maybe this section is really after official direction from specific council members should not come through anyone except through the mayor and through the appropriate chain of command. One thing I think I've said it to this group before, but I'll say it again, and that is the unique thing about the city council and being a city council member is you don't have any power unless there's 3 of you in a room. Because the council isn't an official legislative body unless there's a quorum present. And so I think this might be something that we could come back, if the council wanted to pass everything else tonight and then come back and discuss some of these things, there's no reason that we can't postpone some of these discussions and still adopt some of these other provisions, or we can just postpone the decision on the other provisions while we come back with others. So is it better to go through this in summary version and then ask questions at the end, or to talk about each of these items? I'm not sure what the council's preference would be.
Council, what's your preference? How would you like to approach this? Looks like they're all anxious. John, we'll leave it up to you. The best way to get through this
Okay.
How would you
in an
like to
efficient
present it?
and effective manner. How do you
So
feel?
I think let's do it summary version. And then some of these, I would almost say that if you're okay with the red line changes that are shown, maybe we adopt it tonight or we postpone to a future meeting. I do think it's hard to pass the rules of procedures when everyone isn't here, when you don't have the full body. I know that Councilman Swanson had another meeting. There's some just grammatical things that we've changed. We call our work meetings work sessions. And so we just wanted it, so there's some grammatical changes in here as well, just as we try and clean it up. So you'll see a bunch of those scattered throughout. We found several items where it was a copy and paste from the state code. So this section on closed meetings is a good example. The hard thing about copying and pasting from state code is the state code changes. This section in particular on closed meetings, on meeting minutes that we'll talk about later, was amended 3 times last year and 1 time this year. And so what we've done, or what Susan and I are recommending, is that we take and we just reference the purposes of outlined in state code. So closed meetings are allowed for the purposes outlined in state code. And so it's a shorter, I thought we had the reference in there, but yeah, we will bring back the reference, probably another good reason that we should bring this back later. And we did do that in other sections that I think you'll see where we've inserted the references to the state code, to just make it really clear who's or where it is, so that people who are interested can go and find the state code. We changed the reference to public hearings and even things that are scheduled on the council agenda to be the city recorder as opposed to the city administration in general. The idea being that the city recorder's office is the one that's really in charge of working with the mayor on setting the agenda. There was a few things that we found that are not required under state code that are required under our code, or in practice, we've been doing them differently. This is a good example under E. It says, once basically everyone's spoken during a public hearing, the mayor will strike the gavel and call the meeting closed, or call the public, it should say public hearing closed. And so these are things that we haven't been doing in practice, just like we talked about with Robert's rules. Another example is we recently switched away from people stating their address and just having them say if they're a resident of North Ogden. So that was something in our rules and procedures as well that we're recommending be eliminated. There's no changes to the quorum setting, but there is some changes to the electronic meetings. The idea being that with Zoom being so prevalent, we wanted to make it clear who was allowed to, or what was appropriate for electronic meetings and what we've seen happen in the past year and a half. This first one that's in green is just a copy and paste from another section, making it, so it's not new language, it's just making it clear. If you're on a Zoom or on the phone, you count as if you're in the council room, which means you can vote. We match shirts, and Blake's wearing a blue shirt, so
You'll
Nobody
miss
else
the
next time
memo.
we'll coordinate. And that, so you can see it was just a copy and paste from this item here. This section was a section that we essentially took out. Basically saying that the new modern expectation is that with Zoom and everything, people are allowed to participate. And there was a requirement, was it in this section that said you could only miss so many meetings?
Is that where the $100 comes in?
The $100. We didn't insert the $100 requirement, but we can. But the idea is that there's a lot more capability for people to utilize Zoom meetings. And is the council okay with that? Let's see. There is the chance, and this is under state code, where you don't have to have an anchor location. Although in these rules and procedures, it's essentially the council room will always continue to be the anchor location unless there's a meeting at the senior center or another spot. And then on this number 17, it currently says that no council member can participate in an electronic meeting if it's a closed meeting, unless you're in the room. Again, with modern technology, it's a little easier to control that. So that's a question for council. Are you okay letting council members participate in closed meetings electronically? So we've recommended it be removed. This was a cleanup item. The last time this was adopted, this sentence was cut off. It essentially says if there's a health or physical threat happens during a meeting, the mayor gets to decide on whether to proceed with the meeting or not. It used to just say a decision on how. And so I guess that meant, Mayor, you had a lot of discretion. You could just on how.
Mhm.
So under minutes, this is another, so there's two sentences or sections added. It says the recorder's office will make sure that the minutes meet state code. And then the minutes will be posted onto the website in accordance with state code. And then it eliminates this almost 2 pages worth of information that wasn't necessary. Rule 6 actually outlines the way the agenda works. There's a few items we've added or that we've modified recently. The idea being that when awards are presented or other presentations that don't necessarily require any public comment before them, as well as inserted the conflict of interest and staff comments in the appropriate spots in the agenda. This is a provision that is found in state code that was not included in our procedures. It says that anytime during a public meeting, a council member can ask for a closed session, provided it follows the logic behind the closed sessions. A 2/3 vote will mean that the council would go into executive or closed session. And then we'd follow the state code provisions for that. So this
4 out of 5 council members have to do that to get the 2/3.
Or 2 out of 3.
Yeah, if there's a full council member here.
yeah, so it's not just a simple majority. You're right, because 3 is only 60% as opposed to 66%.
Mhm.
And Councilman
Good math.
Attorney Matt. Trying to remember, who's the guy who worked for Mountain Wire?
Scott Sessions.
His dad's the podiatrist. Anyways,
Oh, Boston.
Fawcett, he never voted for a closed session. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but so I think there was actually a closed session that didn't happen because we didn't have a majority. Anyways, he had a
Thing.
thing for
That doesn't
public
surprise me.
discourse, which was, you know.
Yeah,
good
but
principle.
there's certain things as the recent law was passed. Was it not the Getty? What was it? The
The Garrity.
Garrity law?
Yeah.
There's certain things that, you know, as much as we want to be transparent when you're talking about somebody's livelihood and competence.
And it makes it better for those involved. This is a new section. It's tying in on the conflicts of interest. The idea being just explaining what the process is now that it's on the agenda. This was something that's in our current code that we don't currently do. And this does comply with state statute. If the council would like to, you could do a single vote for everything in the consent agenda instead of going through each one individually. It does also allow for a council member to request something to be moved from the consent to the active if they would like to discuss it, but that's an option. It is left in for now, but the council could amend that or whatever they like. We weren't sure which way the council wanted to go, 3 minutes or 5 minutes for public comment. Historically, we've done 3. Recently, we've done 5.
Only because it said 5.
Yep. And so that's something for the council to provide some feedback on. And another item that we don't, right now, we say that basically adjournment is a non-debatable motion, so we just adjourn. Our procedures technically required us to, so this would be a change saying that we would be following that. The mayor's ready to pound the gavel and adjourn.
I'm feeling bad. You're taking my gavel pounding away in many instances.
Oh, we can still do the pound the gavel. No vote is required, but the mayor must pound the gavel.
I'm fine not pounding the gavel.
Section 8 is a section that is basically the Robert Rules portion. We didn't suggest any changes in here because I think that that's something I think the council needs to sort through and talk about exactly how you want motions made. If you want to be very strict and technical, I did add one thing at the very end of this section, which is a catch-all that says a motion that doesn't strictly follow the motion rules above shall not be held invalid unless it fails to receive the number of votes required. So that's just to make it clear that if there was a mistake in the procedure, that as long as the council was all fully aware of what they were voting on and the votes were affirmative or negative, that the motion would still be finished as part of that.
Our awkward wording.
Yeah.
The awkward wording clause.
This Rule 10, it's not something that every council member is required to do. But it is if you have a business interest in the city. And, you know, the idea is that if there's a potential conflict that's ongoing, the council member should file a document with the recorder's office saying, this is the potential conflict of interest I have. And that way, if anyone ever asks for it, then there's a printed document already. A good example is we had an employee who had a friend who was filing an application for something, and they actually filed a document similar to this just to make it really clear with the city administration that they had this friend who was doing this activity, and because their job crossed paths a little bit with that development activity, they wanted to make it really clear that they were stepping aside. They weren't going to be involved in any of that decision making. Ultimately, that person didn't proceed forward with any of it, but they just felt like it was good practice to just declare the conflict like we do at the beginning of every council meeting. So if any of you have conflicts that you think might fall under this, it would be helpful to, or it might be wise to, or at least your rules are asking you to submit something. So
So for instance, if we discuss using RDA funds in the plaza where my business exists, I think I would like to have something on file like that.
Yeah, and that's a good example is just filing something that says, hey, I have a business interest in Pizza Man. And so any decisions related to that, people should know I have a conflict, or not the conflict, but know about the interest.
I have an interest, yeah.
And state code doesn't require you to recuse yourself, it just requires you to disclose the interest. So in practice, most people have recused themselves because it ends up, that's just a kind of a best practice thing that most people do. But I think that's the last change, except for another work session that's supposed to work meeting. So that is a lot to take in.
We already voted.
You already voted. That's a carryover, so we will fix that. But so probably council, because of that section 8 about the rules and motions, unless you have strong feelings about not amending it, it might be worth postponing this until Councilman Swanson's back. But are there any questions we can answer? Susan's online, she can answer questions as well.
Mayor?
Councilmember Severin, yes, sir.
And I apologize for my disregard for my earlier comment without your permission.
That's not a problem.
Okay. I'm used to the older administration. So.
They were much better.
And you did an excellent job. John, I only had one question, and it was just clarifying. When I went through this, for me, there wasn't any issues with anything, but I did want clarification on Rule 1(4), which involves the mayor. So 4 says the mayor shall receive all messages and communications from the city manager and others addressed to the council as a body and shall be responsible to convey such messages, et cetera, et cetera. So does that mean that as the police department liaison, how does that work? I mean, should the mayor then bring that information back, or am I okay to bring the information back?
So that is why this was identified by
Phil?
Councilman Swanson, and I think others, that we need clarification, because even though this rule, I'm gonna pull up the state code section that's, oh, sorry. The state code section doesn't exist anymore that's referenced here. So chapter 10 doesn't exist in the state code anymore. So, but I thought there was a section dealing with the duties and powers of the mayor that I've lost the reference to.
That's okay. If it's gonna be something that I didn't know Phil had the same question. So let's just wait until Phil's back here and then we can address this, but I just didn't know what the protocol was gonna be for each of us who have liaison, they have a liaison position with city departments, which I think is every one of us.
So when we give our council reports, you gotta give it to the mayor first.
First.
right?
And then the
he
mayor
gives
has to
permission
do
to
this.
say it.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to accomplish, surely the mayor doesn't want to be the hub of all communication in the city. I think the discussion we've had is, giving directions. I think we were looking for a process that we cannot, what I call whiplash, the departments receiving direction from 6 different people. So I think we were going to have a further discussion on the best way to do that, along with responding to citizens. So be assured the mayor does not want to be the hub,
Okay.
but he is very interested in making sure that we don't have 6 different things being relayed, directions to the department heads. So I think that does merit further discussion, but like I said, you can be assured that that's not what the mayor is looking for. He's just looking to make things as efficient and effective as possible for the department heads. So
I agree totally. Thank you.
thanks for the
What do you
comment.
guys-
Mayor, Susan has her hand raised to make a comment. Susan.
All right, let's hear from Susan.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so just right above that same section in 3B on that rule 1, it's also talking about the mayor signing stuff. State code only requires the mayor to sign ordinances and resolutions, and we have minutes listed there. And I guess that's another one I was wondering if maybe we could consider eliminating so that we have a timeline of we have to get things posted per state code within 3 days. And if we eliminate that and that I just sign it or Joyce does it for planning commission, that would be helpful for all of our commissions and committees.
I think that's effective, but my concern is, I believe the council needs to look at that for substance before it's out there. That's my only concern, is that often the intent is hard to put into words and it can be interpreted. But I don't need to sign it, but I do think it warrants a review before.
Yeah, and most cities I spoke with, other cities, they don't have their mayor sign, and so I didn't realize that the difference on that until recently.
And
So I'm open to either way.
And Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the code still requires the council to formally approve the minutes.
Correct.
This would only be after that. It wouldn't require a signature. It would just be a posting onto the website.
Yeah, I'm saying once it gets posted to the website, people read it, that's the gospel. Whether the council changes it or not, they've already made their mind up.
That's all I have.
I would suggest that approval could be made by the city manager. I mean, I trust fully, but it's really hard sometimes to word things properly with it.
Well, and so so essentially they would, because it still requires the council to do a yes, do we approve all the minutes? And then Susan or Joyce would affix their stamp and say, these are the official minutes, they were approved on this date. And that way someone could know that they are the gospel, the new.
Yes, although the gospel's decided before the council approves the minutes. I'm just a realist. So we can have discussion on that too, but I think Susan's point is well taken. It's just, I hate to have that burden placed on Joyce and Susan trying to interpret what the council meant. Okay.
Any other guidance, council, so that if you're okay delaying this or postponing this until a future meeting?
So wasn't there something in there, the meetings have to end by 9:30 and
8:30.
Councilman Barker wanted to change that to 6:30. But isn't there something in there?
Yeah, there is a provision. Let me find it. 9:30.
6:30.
It's thinking. I saw it.
I thought that was in the planning commission. I didn't know.
So it's in both the planning and the council. I don't know why it hasn't found it. Usually it searches quicker than that, but it says essentially that meeting should end by 9:30 unless there's a vote to extend. Yeah.
I just think you get into budget discussions, not that we want to go past 9:30, but I think the council has an obligation to meet as long as it takes to resolve an issue.
So it does say it should be scheduled to end by 9:30. It can be extended by a majority vote. There is the provision, and this is a state code provision that says if there's a public hearing, you have to wait until the public hearing is over. So if there's people here to talk about it, you can't end the meeting early. And in fact, for tax hearings, you can't schedule another meeting after a tax hearing. That's the only thing that can be on the agenda is the tax hearing, so that people don't feel pushed out or rushed out.
Anything else, Councilmember Dalpas?
Yeah, I had some questions for Susan and John a while ago as I was reviewing it, and I just wanted everyone to be aware of some of my questions. One was, I don't know if it's worth discussion on a voting order, and the only reason I say that is it seems like when you call on people to vote, you vary each time, and I think that has a lot of benefit. But would it make sense to have an actual set order? And the reason that I say that is because sometimes one person might, they might vote differently because they started to feel the tide was going in one way or another. And if the voting order always goes in a similar pattern, it might make that a little different. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. And then another question, in past meetings that I've attended, sometimes people have yielded their time, their like public comments time to another person. I don't know if that's officially addressed in our rules and procedures. I know we've allowed it in the past, but I think we should probably have it somewhere in the rules
To allow it or not allow it.
to allow or not allow, or just have the
Just
discussion
have
if
discussion about it.
it makes sense. It was, if I remember correctly, it was usually like maybe a father and son was here and, you know, a son said, oh, I yield my minutes to my father. So father gets 3 instead of 3 minutes, gets 6 minutes, you know, so I don't know how big of a deal that is, but something we might want to think about.
Good points. I would just wonder if in order voting would really change that sway. I think this way it gives kind of a random, but I'm fine either way, but I'm not sure it would stop people from saying, and in fact, in some cases, their vote would become irrelevant, right?
Mhm.
Because 3 have already voted in favor. Now that can happen on a random basis too, but I think it might impact, you know, the meaningful of their vote if it's set that way, but surely open to whatever the council decides. Anything else you'd like to give John direction on?
Nope.
And I almost hate to bring this up, but I have had council members continually remind that there's not a requirement for public comments. I think the ombudsman has said that numerous times. I'm surely all in favor of having public comments because I think we all want to hear, but everything in there would almost make that mandatory, gives future councils or no councils the option. It might say if public comments, which I believe this council is all in favor of, but who knows in future councils. So just a thought, because I have had some approach me about that issue.
Okay.
We make it clear I'm in favor of it, but it might be good to have an option.
Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember
Just for
Severing.
clarification, you're saying that there's been somebody's on the council that said that they did not want public comment?
Well, I didn't want to narrow it down to one, so I used the term somebody's.
That's why I changed mine to somebody's.
Yeah,
Okay, just curious.
so, yeah.
It wasn't me.
Okay, anything else, John, that you need guidance on? I think that issue on how we communicate and needs further discussion as we've indicated in the council.
I think the focus on Rule 8, this how motions are made, this is the formal Robert-ish rules. It'd be helpful to know if you want to just leave it as is, or if you'd like us to scrub that and come back with Mickey Mouse Clubhouse rules, or what you'd like.
Well, I think we had a discussion, the actual Robert's Rule of Order requires discussion before the motion's even made. And no further discussion after that, if I remember, because we tried that and it was like way awkward. So my opinion is that we follow them as closely as possible. But once again, you know, somebody over in England dreamt those up in the 1600s. Things have changed a bit.
And that is Robert's rules, and you know, Mayor, I should have brought this to your attention at the time, but our motions specifically say we can talk about it before a motion is made. So our rules don't follow Robert's rules, and that's why it's meant to be the way that the council wants to follow the rules.
Well,
I like number 2.
So
After we've discussed it, don't make a motion.
feels more natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
May I comment there?
You bet.
I would recommend that the entire council, the staff, all the employees of the city read the entire 700 pages of Robert's rules, and then we'll make a final decision.
I wouldn't have called on you had I known you were gonna say that, Councilmember.
I'd like to refer
I'll second
Councilman
that
Severance to Rule 1.4 that says he can't talk to us. I'm just kidding.
So does that give you actual, some direction?
I think so, and I think we might go through it and just look to see if there's anything archaic in Rule 8 that the council hasn't identified and just make a suggestion there if you're okay with that.
And I think, and maybe I missed that in reading, John, but in there, and I think it's actually it's codified that if an issue is brought back to the council after a vote has been taken, it can only be brought back by those who voted in the negative. Is that anywhere in our procedures? I believe that's, I don't know if that's Robert rules or if that's.
So that is in Robert's rules. I don't remember if it's in here that you have to be on the prevailing side to make a motion to reconsider the motion that prevailed. Yeah.
Okay, maybe you could take a look at that.
Okay.
With that, let's kind of work that up and come back with the draft with the things we've talked about, with I think the major thing being how we communicate throughout the city. Would that be correct? Okay. All right, thank you, John. So we won't be taking a vote on that this evening. We'll be postponing that, John, because I think it's the
In fact, we did change it in our rules. It was called tabling, so we've now changed it to postponing.
but I think since this is on the agenda to take action, if I understand this right, because there is a resolution that we would need a motion to table that decision till a future council meeting. Would that be correct?
That would be the 100% correct procedure.
Okay,
Mayor,
Councilman Barker,
I'll make a motion that we table or postpone this till a future date.
which one? Table, address later in the
Slash
meeting, or postpone?
That way we cover both options because we haven't postponed it yet.
Okay, so your motion is to postpone to the
Table
future?
because it's not official.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second to Councilmember Barker's motion? It's getting late.
I second that.
Second by Councilmember Severing. All those in favor of table / postponing this, please say aye.
I
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to our council departments reports. We'll start with you, Councilmember Barker. Do you have anything relevant you'd like to share this evening?
I got a couple of things. So Parks Department and Recreation, they're hiring for a park superintendent, parks worker, parks seasonal, lifeguards, cashiers, grounds, and recreation. So there's a lot of positions opening for hire. Seasonal applications are closing in a week and we need more. So if you know anyone that wants to be a seasonal parks worker, have them apply. Also, the nets are up for tennis, volleyball, and basketball, so we can get our outdoor sports on if we want. Baseball, softball, kickball, t-ball registrations open and ends in a couple weeks. And I was actually hoping Brenda would be here because they sent out an email with the spring and summer activities. And I was gonna see if she got it. Okay, so they sent that out. So everyone check that out. And then the most exciting news, the swimming pool made money last year. After we paid off their bond, they netted about $90,000. So Tiffany said that's a culmination of really hot weather coming out of COVID, no rain, and everybody wanted to get out and go swimming. So it's going up.
That's good news. Anything else, Councilmember Barker, you'd like to share
That's
this evening? All right, thank you. Councilmember Dalpaz, anything you'd like to share on building and planning or the Senior Citizen Center?
Yeah, so on an update for planning is that we were awarded a WFRC grant to study the North Ogden Plaza. So that was $100,000 grant. It's official. So we're excited about the possibilities with that. So more information to come from Scott Hess. And then just wanted to give everyone an update that Scott and Brandon will be attending the Utah Planning Association this week in Kanab. That'll help them kind of further themselves and their knowledge. That'll be really good. And then I did attend the Senior Center board meeting just recently last week. and it went really well. It was good to get to know everyone and start to go down that path. Something for consideration is they are telling me that, I don't know if this is new news, John, or not, but they're saying that their PA system is pretty outdated. I can't remember, I don't remember conversations about that, but yeah,
It
it
is.
sounds like it might be a thing. So this might be something to consider for the future, maybe 5-10 year plan or whatever. They're just thinking that it's a little outdated, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Alpez. I would just add on that grant, I think we have a $10,000 match, according to John.
Yes, that's right. And that match is in the budget, and that will be part of budget conversations upcoming.
Thank you. Councilmember Swanson is absent tonight. John, do you have anything that you're aware of in finance, or give the council a heads up on our budget discussion? And
Yeah, so you all got the sales tax report. We are still trending above our projections. I think right now we're sitting about 20% above our projections, which is about $450,000. More collected to date than we expected. That is through 6 months, because we collected about 2 months late, or we get the report about 2 months late. We also, because of the budget, we were ahead of ourselves. We're now right about in line. So we had planned a work session for next Tuesday because we missed the caucus night at the beginning of the month. And we hadn't planned a work session on April 5th because it's spring break. And I know several of you will probably be participating with your family in activities. So that will be next week. Katie, who is the HR manager, is going to be here acting as our deputy attorney or deputy recorder for that meeting, because she's still technically can be deputized, and she's going to help fill in for some meetings as needed if there's other conflicts. So she'll be here for that meeting. But at that work session, Jamie and I and the mayor, he's not aware of this yet, but we're going to send out some questions for you to think about before that meeting. It's not going to be a list of like 30 questions, but it's the culmination of that hierarchy. And then where it seems like we're focusing and maybe providing Jamie with some answers so she can get the budget rolling. We will also give you a schedule next week for kind of what we expect for budget meetings between now and May 10th, when we have to adopt our tentative budget, which should include discussions about employee benefits, capital projects, fund balances, as well as some presentations from your individual departments focusing on those deliverables. That was the question that was, you as the liaisons and department heads are supposed to work on. So fun and exciting things. We'll have that for you next Tuesday. And then I believe you all received the email about the team building exercise on Thursday. If you would like to participate, please come. I know many of you are already planning on coming, but just a reminder that that's happening as well, so that I think you saw from the feedback of some of those small groups that the employees and the people who work for the city really want to make a connection with the council. And so any chance you can to do that, they surely appreciate.
So what time is that again, Thursday?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Been learning.
Yeah. And I think that's everything I've got, Mayor.
all right, John, I think just in the spirit of transparency, as most of you have probably guessed, the city's experiencing many of the same things other businesses are in regards to wages, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And there are options. I think in the current budget, there is built in some increase in property taxes, which is very concerning. I've had a conversation with some of you with what's happening to our citizens who are not currently employed, even though they got a nearly 6% increase, say, in their Social Security. That's eaten up with what's happening with food, gas, et cetera. So I think we've got to be very sensitive. But John, maybe you could briefly talk about the option of increasing sales tax in the city, the rate.
So I don't have all the information on the process, but there are about 10 cities in the state that do a local option sales tax of 0.2%. So if sales tax was 0.685, it would go to 0.705. And one of the cities that does that is Riverdale, South Salt Lake, Murray. But what that does is that would generate some additional general fund money. One of the things I haven't got an answer on yet is whether or not that would apply to food tax. Because there's the difference between food, unprepared and prepared food. But we do know it would definitely apply to Amazon shipments. So, because that's the quintessential thing that we see. And so, but the idea is if it did apply to all purchases in the city, I hate to guarantee you this is the number, but it could be. Oh, the mayor says don't guarantee a number.
Yeah, because we don't know what the number is.
We don't.
But as soon as you guarantee it, that's the number, right?
Right. But that will likely go through a process similar to the truth in taxation for property tax, where there's a public hearing, there's a chance for comment and feedback, and the council would adopt something formally that the state sales tax commission would basically we'd have to follow their procedures for the approval.
Thanks, John. And I just think that a consumption tax is fairer than a fixed tax. And as you'll see with some of the inclusion of things that have been recommended, the budget is, what term did you use?
Broken.
Broken.
We are not in the black or in the red, but we have not met some of the goals that we set at the outset for capital improvement fund and things like that.
So we'll have that discussion, and John is going to look into that. So be giving that some thought as we approach budget time. Let's go on to item number 14, which is public comments.
Mayor, can I make a
Okay,
comment?
yeah.
I must have been, I had a kind of alarming text that came my way. So I had just a few things I wanted to mention. I was hoping that maybe.
Hey, Councilmember Severing, just wonder, keeping in order here, we do have item 15, if that would work for you.
I'm sorry, I got a text that my mom was not responding, and so it kind of caught me off guard. I was worried about my mom.
Well, if
So
you need
we're not
to
to public
go,
comments
feel
with
free to
staff.
go.
Or the public comment, but we're not.
He's just saying to hold on for a second until item 15.
Sorry.
But if you need to leave,
No, she's okay.
okay, good.
No, she's okay.
Good. All right, anyone here or online? John, if you would watch that, do we have anyone that would like to make public comments? Which would be subject to our procedures of 5 minutes, stating your name and if you're a resident of the city. I see no one here, John, so if you'd watch online.
We do have one from Susan Kilborn.
Let's go to Ms. Kilborn for her comments.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It wouldn't be a meeting without hearing from me. Susan Kilborn, 3370 North, 400 East, Lakeview Heights, North Ogden, Utah. My husband and I live in what you call a twin home. We call a dual dwelling residence. I just wanted to clarify a couple things and then ask a question. First of all, if you look at our property from the front, you would probably call it a twin home. If you look at the deed on our property, it is classified as a single family dwelling. The reason why is because there is on each side of the dwellings 6 or 7 inches of concrete on each side, and then 5 feet of dead space in between. They're both considered single family dwellings. I don't hear what goes on with my neighbors, and good God, I hope they don't hear what goes on in our home. But I just wanted to say that I would hate to see the city single out or denigrate dual dwelling homes, because for senior citizens, we downsized And I'm happy we did. I know there are a lot of people out there in our age group who are upsizing, and that's fine. But it's also an opportunity not only for seniors to have the size of property that they can maintain properly, rather than let things go to waste or have yards that they can't take care of anymore, and allow them to travel. It's also an opportunity for young folks getting into the market to have somewhere they can call their own home. I heard something about requiring maybe when there is a twin home or dwelling home situation that one owner be responsible or live in one of these. I don't see it any different than, are you going to require developers to live in an apartment complex and a high rise? Or what about individuals who rent out their own homes? I can send you a list of property that are rentals that maybe you might want to consider. They might need to clean up their areas. I just don't want to see us make those kind of decisions. And I'm questioning probably just why this was brought up to begin with. And that's the only comment I have, other than, Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to participate in providing you applicants for our judge position. Thank you, guys. You know I love you.
And thanks for your service on there. It, hopefully I mentioned, but thanks again. All right, John, anyone else?
Not at this time.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 15, and let's let you go first on that, Councilmember Severing.
Sorry, Mayor, I thought you guys. had
Don't be
all night
sorry,
for-
you know, we're just trying to keep order here.
Yep. So I was hoping that maybe beginning in April, that we could have an update at least once a month on the water situation.
That's a good point. I had a conversation with John, was that today or yesterday, John?
Today.
Today, about getting that on our planning meeting for discussion, and how we can improve education. And some have seen the program Flip the Strip. John informs me that would be something that Pineview would have to, or I guess Mr. Marriott up there.
Yeah.
In there to sponsor that. So that will be on our work session.
Okay.
On that regard.
And then the second thing is, I had a call from one of the citizens, Tyler Crittenden, who apparently had talked to you, John,
Yes,
about extension of a garage so that he could have a third car garage.
correct. Yeah.
So he called me, having talked to you, and said, you apparently told him that 3 of the council needed to approve something like that.
So it's he'd be asking for a text amendment to our zoning code. His zone currently requires a 10-foot setback. And I think this would have been an 8-foot setback with what he was proposing.
Okay.
And so that would require a text amendment that would go through the planning commission and then ultimately to the council.
Okay. Okay, so he didn't tell me about the planning commission, so. All right, so that's moving forward, or it can now move forward, or. it just
So
needs
he
to be
hasn't
on the-
submitted an application for the
Okay, so he
language
has to do the
amendment.
application. All right.
I did tell him that it would probably be good to maybe come to public comments and ask the council their thoughts on it.
Okay,
Because what we'd be doing, he's in the R110 zone. We'd be changing the setbacks for every lot in the R110 zone, not just his. And so that's something that the council would need to look at and weigh.
okay, so I need to have him probably contact you again. So
Okay.
we can start moving forward with the application then. And then I've been trying to stop by and talk to the Ashworths, but their mailbox doesn't look like it's been repaired, so I was kind of curious to know where we're at on that.
I know that we reached out to him with the policy change. It could be that it's contractor timing. It is a pretty busy, or it could be have something to do with the frost. Because it
Okay.
still gets too cold at night that maybe the mortar wouldn't set appropriately.
So we're moving forward and being able to take care of that.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And then last but not least, I think the Wings Guard Seacrest situation needs to be resolved as quick as we can get that taken care of. So I don't know where we're at in that process, but I had one of them contact me and say, you know, what, where are we at in this? And
Recently.
yeah, this last week. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's all I needed to mention. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Anyone else heard from individuals in the city that we ought to be aware of? I don't see any. So, John, do you have any comments?
No, I wrote protocol and gave you all my comments earlier, so I apologize.
It's $100. I don't have any comments, so with that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second.
Second,
All right, meeting adjourned.
you gotta smack your gavel.
Thank you, I've been waiting that